Welcome to the Leading at the Next Level podcast with Dove Development Consulting, the show built to provide ongoing support for your leadership journey. I am Wes Dove. I'm here with a lifelong friend of mine, Ben Coffman. Before I give you a proper introduction and turn it over to Ben, I'll kind of give you the ins and outs of this. So we've done this podcast for right at a year now as we record this, and there's going to be a lot of uses for this because it's a pretty special thing that Ben's engaged with on us for that. But with the podcast, we initially created it as a resource for somebody to get content that could really serve them in their leadership journey and help them fix some of the daily things that really come down to the people that we need to lead effectively. Now, one of the things we always do is when you finish up the podcast, as we close, I'll reference a resource that we offer a 45-day all-access trial to at no cost if you reach out to us. But before we do that, let's get to the meat and potatoes. So one of the most exciting things that Cindy and I have gotten to do over the last 10 years is we're going to be hosting an event called the Leadership Legacy Experience on June 13th, 2025 at James Madison University's Atlantic Union Bank Center. And we're doing a lot of neat things with that. The focus is on leading with clear purpose, my new book. And I was able to coerce, and I use that word somewhat lightly. I'm not sure. Maybe Ben will talk about that differently. Ben to be the MC for the event for several different reasons. One is I love him dearly. He's a great friend. But the other reason is Ben has for 35 years dedicated his life both as a teenager and through his professional career to public service. That's been his clear purpose. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. But Ben, because we are doing the event, and really our community partner for the event that we're supporting is the Harrisonburg Professional Firefighters Foundation. That's really a cool nonprofit that does some pretty amazing stuff that we'll talk about in another episode. Ben, that's been his life. He knows how much that the work that organization does matters. And I was able to coerce him to be the MC, the kind of guy calling the plays, so to speak, for the event. So Ben, how about giving a brief overview of your professional background, your experience, your industry, some of the things that you do?
Yeah, started out, as Wes said, I've been in the fire department for a long time. Started out as a young volunteer. We were in Timberville, Virginia, kind of in Rockingham County there. And my uncle was a volunteer firefighter, and he started bringing me to the firehouse as a 14-year-old, and even younger, actually. We started going by and visiting and stuff. I really got into it. So I joined at 14 years old as a junior volunteer firefighter, riding my bicycle to the fire station. And sometimes to calls, depending on how close they were. There were some long pedals in there occasionally. And we would throw the fire. If I was lucky, the guys would throw my bike on top of the fire truck and give me a ride back to the firehouse afterwards. So that did happen a couple of times. But yeah, so that started out a lifelong career, and really tried to take the best of the fire department. I decided early on I wanted to explore everything the fire department had to offer. And so I've worked for several different career departments, very, very small rural department in Montana, to the very large urban Fairfax County Fire Department, where I retired from recently. And now I'm kind of in between in a suburban department up by Frederick County, Virginia, near Winchester. So in that mix, I've traveled all over the place and done a lot of different interesting things. So.
Oh, what got you? I remember that. I remember it distinctly because we were in Boy Scouts together before you started doing the bicycle stuff. What was the thing that really latched you onto it? That it went from, hey, this is kind of fun to hang out with the guys at the volunteer fire station to this is going to be my career. And I guess that kind of tees up my next question. What was not just your clear purpose for accepting the leadership role, but what was your clear purpose for even moving into that as a career choice? And then maybe talk about the clear purpose for accepting leadership responsibility with that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as a 13, 14-year-old teenager, the sound of the sirens, the big trucks going to fires, the excitement, that was a huge part of it. And so that really kind of pulled me in as a volunteer. But my plan had been, I still was, my goal was to work as a rancher or work on, agricultural, raising cattle kind of thing. So early on in our career, or in my time in the fire department, we ran a call for what was at the time the first person that we knew of in the area that had HIV, and we didn't know what it was. They just, we had no idea. And so when we went there, we put on hazmat suits and air tanks to go take care of the person, which was obviously, now we know, way overkill, but no one knew what to do. and we weren't sure. And so then the fire department said, we got to start learning. We need to figure this out because we're going to take care of more people who have this, and we need to understand it. So that really was eye-opening to me that, hey, we're the fire department. Like, we know what we're doing. And it's like, sometimes we don't, and we need to learn. And that volunteer department, which is made up of people who work for different industries, we had a poultry industry that would let people leave to go run calls in the middle of the day. There was an electronics repair business to let people leave. They were supportive of a community trying to teach our firefighters how to handle calls, to take care of our own community members. So that really drew me in, and I was like, man, this is awesome. Like, they want to learn. The fire department is about learning and growth, and that really kind of spurred my interest to go beyond.
Yeah, and the reality is, in those days, it was predominantly volunteer services in the smaller, in the rural areas like we grew up in, right? And there were a few paid folks in our county, in Rockingham County, but it was a very select few.
Yeah, so the way that it typically worked in Rockingham County, and in most counties around the area, it was all volunteer. You would let, different industries would let their volunteers leave in the middle of the day. Like, there was the bank that was next to, I believe, Farmers and Merchants, next to the fire station in Timberville. So one of their vice presidents was our driver. So if a fire call came in during the day, he would jump over and run and drive the fire truck in his suit and tie. And, we had all kinds of people like that. There were a few career firefighters, paid firefighters, and they were typically one or maybe two in a station, but they were generally assigned as the drivers. And so their job was just to make sure that they had someone there, because that's really the hardest position to fill in the fire department, is getting someone who's able to drive effectively one of the, a large fire truck and get water to come out of it and go through the hose successfully without knocking someone down. So that's the toughest one. So that was what started out. It was all volunteers, farmers, ranchers, businessmen, wherever, and then a paid driver. And it's grown from there. As volunteerism has continued to shrink, unfortunately, with the ability of people to leave work and things like that. Now there are far more paid firefighters than there were in those days.
No, Ben, in every industry that I've worked in or around in my career, I've seen folks work their way up the ladder. They would earn promotions. They would do things through, they would get those promotions through working hard, being really, really good at executing the task that they were trained for, be it as a carpenter, as a machine operator, as anything, in every career. And then they would have responsibility for leading a team, managing people, and so on. And that's a whole different ball of wax. Talk to me a little bit about what your clear purpose was from going from that great firefighter to somebody that was accept that leadership responsibility, because you did that, and you've taken on some pretty significant roles in the process.
Well, early in my time as a paid firefighter, I was working I believe I was at Harrisonburg at the time, but I went to a training course in New York City. We were learning about structural firefighting from people who go to far more fires up there than we would here, and so we're getting some good lessons. And one of the video lessons we were looking at and talking about was a video from Boston Fire Department. And the person they were interviewing was 63 years old, I believe. He was getting ready to retire, but he had been hired. And when he was at 18, he went into one fire station on one truck. And that's the truck he worked on in the same seat his entire career. And I was like, that's the guy I want to be. I want to be hardcore firefighter. I don't want to worry about anything else. I just want to focus on being the very best firefighter I can be. And then as you start getting into firefighting and you realize there are some ability to specialize and learn and be very, very good at one specific position, but the job really requires that you have to have a vast, well-rounded knowledge. We go to hazmat calls, we go to medical calls, we go to structure fires, we go to grass and forest fires, we go to car accidents. You can't just be one thing. And so you really have to learn. And so one of the things that prompted me to move further in the leadership journey was I became an advanced life support provider. So I was working towards paramedic. And so as you get higher level medical certifications, you start to be in charge of patient care. And so you're directing the rest of the crew. And it was kind of complicated to a degree because you're there as the highest level medical person, but there's also a team leaders like a captain or a lieutenant. And sometimes that caused conflict or and it was the natural progression for me to look and say, okay, I'm a team leader in a very specific part of what I do, but I really have the ability now and the training and the well-roundedness to be a team leader across the board. And I felt like I could support and serve the crew better in that role. And that's what kind of pushed me to move forward. The fire department is luckily, as opposed to a lot of businesses, maybe is a very well-defined pathway to promotion. So you know exactly what training you need to have. You know exactly how much experience, so many years, usually 5 years of as in the fire department, officer training, those kind of things. And so that was well-defined, but it's really up to each person to decide when they're ready for that. And once I started moving into that advanced medical role, that's when I felt like I was ready.
Yeah, I often share how much folks moving in and taking on that leadership responsibility, whether they're going to do the behaviors that are necessary to truly lead, as opposed to just be a boss that cracks the whip. They really impact people's lives. And what you just shared, gosh, that impacts people's lives even more so. Not just the team that's around you, but the patients, the folks that you're providing service to. And if that goes wrong, gosh, people's lives truly are on the line. So that's a big deal. Now, you've invested heavily over the course of your career in not just that growth and taking the technical skill training. You've done a lot in the leadership development aspect. I know today you're even a trainer. You do some stuff for the National Fire Academy, and you impact a lot of people. Talk to me about what started that journey for you to really focus on that leadership development and training for yourself, and maybe how it's transitioned into to you being able to help other people.
Yeah, and I think it started to a degree early on, like I was talking about with the call when the fire department decided we needed to do more training. And then the chief of that department, a guy named Wes Hinkle at the time, was mentoring me, and he had been a career firefighter. He was our volunteer chief for a long time. He was very, very dialed in person on the fire department. And he was, encouraging me to look for a larger department. He encouraged me to go to Northern Virginia, somewhere where there was a lot of opportunity to be able to expand. And he mentioned to me then that this is a journey, and that journey will carry you through if you follow the pathway of trying to constantly grow and always looking for the next opportunity to learn. And not that you just willy-nilly jump around, but you're always in this progression of, okay, I've achieved this level, I'm comfortable in this level, I'm able to perform. What's the next thing that I would think about? And so we're always trying to think about what's the next step up, so that you're ready. If something were to happen, you can step up and lead at the next level. And be able to be successful with that. And so that's something we train a lot. We talk succession planning in the fire department all the time. It's a huge part of what we do. And that really was the journey for me to try to think about that growth. And part of that then is, as you start to become, a good technician at your level, you've mastered whatever it is you're working on. How do you teach that to the next people coming up behind you? So you're always keeping that succession planning going. If I'm a great engine driver, then I'm training the next guy behind me to become an engine driver. And if I'm stepping up as a lieutenant, I'm training the next guy to become the lieutenant. And so there's always that progression. And so I got to a point where, when you're doing that in a firehouse basis, you're looking at your crew of 4 to 10 people in your fire station. You're like, okay, I'm going to train the next one. And then you start getting into a place where now we need to take that and spread it beyond. So how can I reach more people? So instead of my fire station, now maybe I'm looking at my fire department. And so I'm teaching across that level. And then I got hired as a adjunct instructor for the state of Virginia. So I'm teaching fire officers across Virginia how to become new fire officers. And then that progressed. And now I teach at the National Fire Academy. So I teach fire officers from across the entire country, and sometimes even foreign countries that come in that are sending people to learn from us. And so it's just a natural progression of making sure that succession planning goes.
I love that you shared that, because I see so many folks, and quite frankly, it's been one of the biggest things I've seen people stumble in their careers over, is not having the security to pass on the things that they've mastered to other people, out of fear that, gosh, if that person gets better, it will diminish my value to the company, and maybe I'll get canned, maybe they'll replace me, blah, blah, blah. And to be very, very honest, Ben, I've seen folks lose their jobs because they kept such a tight hold on the things that they should be training other people to do, that it wouldn't allow them to master the things that only they could do moving forward. So that's huge. That's just a natural progression. That's something that was built in. And I know Wes Hinkle, and I'm thankful to hear that he was the one that kind of seeded that from the beginning for you. So very cool. Yeah. So you've been with us the last several years at our Live to Lead Harrisonburg event. And I was able to, and I use the term coercion loosely, but you agreed just to serve as the MC for the Leadership Legacy experience that's coming up in a few months. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen from the Live to Lead Harrisonburg, and now what you're excited about, even though I've tasked you with some responsibility coming up in June.
Yeah, this is huge. And so this is something I actually talk about all the time now. So in the fire department world, the one place that we do get into a little bit of an issue is we get very siloed. So we tend to stay in our own fire department world. And so we don't train outside emergency services. Like we train with, law enforcement, we'll train with, medical providers, hospitals, but general businesses and government officials across the region, we just don't interact with very much. And so the Live to Lead, originally I really liked what you guys were doing. I saw the business. I was very happy with, the progress you guys are making. And I was like, man, I really want to see what you're teaching. So I came to that first one and it was amazing. Like I got to interact with businesses that we never interact with from the fire department level. And I learned a whole new perspective on how the fire department is viewed, public safety, where issues were that were similar between industry and fire service and where there were differences. And I followed on with that. I was just graduating in a class for the National Fire Academy called the Executive Fire Officer Program. So it's a 4-year program, essentially like a master's degree from the National Fire Academy. And it teaches you to be an executive leader in a fire department. So that had a course that was all about leading in your community. And it required you to go out and interact with your local chamber of commerce, which I had never done before, because we ride fire trucks, we do our thing, and that's it. And it was amazing to me the amount of interaction that we could have and the success we could have if we would interact more out in the community in that level. And so that really inspired me through the Live to Lead to make sure I'm attending that every year. I want to be there and be part of that. And I talk about it all the time now, like we need to be out in the fire department, not just, from the inspector level, because that's where most people who are in private industry interact with the fire department. Fire inspector shows up. We're angry because you got your door shut, locked, whatever. You haven't checked your fire extinguishers. And then we leave. And you're like, I hate the fire department, whatever. And I heard that a lot when I was at the Chamber of Commerce, and it was great because it's like, we need to hear that. And so there's so many other places that we interact though, and that we need to be together and working together, and that we can benefit both industry and government at the fire department level, especially. And so that was huge. And so then when this opportunity came up, I really felt like there was a great progression to help take this to the next level. So if I'm benefiting from the lesson I got in Live to Lead the first year, and then I try to talk about it and teach it a little bit to the other people the next couple of years, and now this is another opportunity just to expand that reach to help make sure that the fire departments and the fire service as a whole is seeing the influence that it could have, and that we should be getting back from industry.
Yeah, I chuckled as you're sharing that about the inspector coming and so on, because in the first part of my career, I was a safety guy, right? I'm working out of a human resources office, and I'm a safety guy, and one of your former bosses was that guy that we would be frustrated with when he would show up. And as a matter of fact, I'm serving on the Professional Firefighter Foundation board here in Harrisonburg, and he's on that board. So I chuckle now that we can be friends, and may or may not have said, why did he have to show up?
I was a fire inspector, and when you go with your fire inspector, you spend weeks learning the code book. I mean, you dive into the code book and read every line of that, and then you come out and you're like so into it that it's just like, why is this business not following the rules? This is so simple. And then it's like, now you sit down and talk to someone that Live to Lead or whatever, and they're like, hey, let me ask you, I had this fire inspection last year, and this is what they told me. What do you think? And it's like, oh, that really doesn't make sense. And you start seeing that there needs to be a little different interaction, and there's more that we can do beyond just the code book.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, it wasn't just the fire inspector that we were annoyed with. We were equally annoyed with the OSHA inspector too. Not because we didn't want to take care of people, not because we wanted people to be safe, but because we were responsible for making money to keep people fed. Right. So things have to go hand in hand. So every now and then we've got to filter the legislation or the regulation through a brain cell. So,
well, anyway. That's one thing we've started talking about a lot now with the code. And thankfully, this is a great conversation. We talk about there's a spirit and intent, and there's the actual written word. And somewhere in there, we need to make sure that we're joining those two together so we have effective safety, but without harming the people we're trying to help.
Yeah, 100%. Because gosh, if the business can't afford to do it, then nobody's helped, right?
Yep.
So, what would you like anybody hearing this, be it now or after the event or whatever? What would you like them to know about the organization that you're a part of, that be it in Frederick County or more globally as the fire department as a whole, that they probably aren't aware of?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is just that we face a lot of the similar issues to private industry, which is, through some of the courses I've taken with you and the retention and recruitment course and some other things, we also struggle to get people, and we look for good people, great employees, people who want to come and be motivated and do work and do great things for us. And it's hard to find. And recruitment is very difficult. Retention is very difficult. People move between fire departments pretty freely. So that's something that, we struggle with as well. And I think that's a great point for us to share back and forth and understand. It's real people. And so one of the things that I really love about Frederick County specifically is that all of our fire stations right now are owned by volunteer companies. And we provide, the county provides career staff to in the station 24/7. But it truly is a joint effort. And the hardest thing to do in the fire department in a lot of these cases is to put aside ego. And that's very difficult. And they do an amazingly good job. We go to these meetings, and for me, I've been in Frederick County for just about a year and went to the first meeting of the joint volunteer and career side. And I expected there to be all out battles. Everyone works hard to put aside their ego there. So career staff don't say, hey, we're the only ones running the calls because we're in the station all the time. And volunteers aren't saying, well, hey, it's my firehouse. You don't own any of it. We own all of it. Instead, it's like, how can we make things better? And I think that's a huge point. And whether you're in private industry, government, fire department, whatever, understanding that we have to be humble and accept that we can't do it all ourselves and that we need each other to work together. That's a huge point. If we can move forward on that foundation, I think we can do great things in anywhere.
Yeah. So you shared this with me, and it was very, very similar to what a buddy of mine who's a chief of police in a town nearby shared. If for somebody to come on and get spun up once they went through all the trainings and all the stuff they need to do to be an effective firefighter. In his case, it was a police officer. It's around $100,000 in total cost to train that person, and specific to the recruitment and retention. And how often bigger departments will say, they've already trained them, let's poach them. Right?
Oh yeah,
that's a real deal.
Yeah, and so for us, for our Frederick County right now, our pipeline is 18 months, and that's pretty standard across the fire department. So there aren't many people out there who are fully trained firefighters that we can bring on. So we're hiring a lot of people who have never been firefighters. So we have to start them at the very front end, going through EMT school, firefighter school, all that stuff. So from the day that you apply till the day that you're an effective released firefighter in our department is about 18 months and a little over $100,000 of our investment in your training and your time to get qualified. So that's a huge investment. And then what happens is that we have so many openings that we have trouble filling. So like for Frederick County, we can only absorb about 15 people or 16 people a year. We have about 30 that we have open positions for right now. So we can't physically bring on enough people to fill all the openings we have. But for a lot of departments like, Northern Virginia, Loudoun County, Fairfax County, Prince William, they have far more openings. They have the ability to bring people on. And so they end up looking for people who are qualified somewhere else. So they want to take Frederick County, trains all those people up, and then they're looking for lateral firefighters. They want to bring in someone that instead of sending them through that 18-month pipeline, now because they're already trained, they are a couple weeks from application to hire, get them in a quick, 2-month maybe at most school, just to teach them how Prince William or Loudoun or Fairfax does it, and then they're out in the field. Yep. And so it tremendously cuts that pipeline down. But that's a huge issue for us because we can't compete financially with the ability that they have to offer salaries and other benefits.
Yeah, and that's where I make a point heavily. And quite frankly, my friend that I'm referencing here as a police chief, I think he's done it well. I'm not going to pretend like it's perfect. He's created an atmosphere and a culture while he's not competing financially or on benefits. It's competitive, but it's certainly not over and above. It's actually less than a lot. I've watched him keep a pipeline of folks that say, hey, when you've got a position, let me know. I want to work for you. I want to be part of the team you've got. And that doesn't happen overnight, but it happens over time when solid leadership's in place. And it's about how do we make this culture? And you and I've talked a good bit about that too. And I see you doing it in Frederick.
That's something we just had a conversation on Tuesday about making sure that we want to understand our culture. We want the culture to reflect what we would like it to be. And, we can't just sit at the fire chief level and be, oh, hey, we had a conversation in the office and we decided this is our culture. Like, that's not how it works. It'd be nice, I guess, to some degree. But, we want our people to understand what our department has to offer and how great it can be to work for us versus, and nothing bad about it. Like all those northern departments, the Northern Virginia, they're amazing departments and they have great opportunities. But we also have great opportunities. And sometimes that doesn't get showcased. And what we try to do is get the people who are in the fire stations, who are doing the work for us, the boots on the ground. We want them to showcase what they think our culture is. And we want to make sure that the department that we're trying to build and support reflects what they want the culture to be. And that's very difficult sometimes, but that's a huge part of what we talk about every week as we get together as a senior staff. What is it that we're doing to support those boots on the ground troops and making sure that they are feeling the culture we want them to feel?
Yeah. And the reality is it's about right fit. You don't need all the firefighters in Virginia, but the ones you want are the ones that really fit and enjoy being a part of what you do. So it's just how do we create that for folks?
Yeah, we have unique stuff. Like in Frederick County, we're surrounded by mountains and forests. And so some people really love wildland firefighting and forest firefighting. And that's not something that you're going to go to Fairfax and get. And so that's, or to Prince William and get that. Those are things that are unique to us. And we try to highlight and showcase those unique features.
Well, and I'm not going to kid you, I'm pretty biased. I like the traffic that we deal with, you in the Frederick County, me in Rockingham County. I like that way better than what you were dealing with when you were going in and out of Fairfax every day.
My first 3 years in Fairfax, I commuted from Harrisonburg to Fairfax for work. So that was pretty horrendous. I learned a lot about 66 and 81. And I'm not sad that I don't have to drive that every day anymore.
Amen to that. Now, you've been, the next question I'm going to toss to you is probably going to be a hard one, not because to find something, but to find just something to use as an example. Can you share something, an example of where you've been part of a successful project, campaign, something that you were involved with in the fire community and the impact that it really had on the community that you were serving?
Yeah, it's a little tough to pick out just one, I think, but I'll talk just a little bit about what the recent situation I was in. So, I'm limited, I guess, in what I can really say overall in some of the details, but I was deployed to Reagan Airport. So part of my job at Reagan Airport was not being on a boat in the river and was not doing boots on the ground things. It was really coming in and trying to bring people together and make sure that the right people were at the table to make decisions. The right information was available to those people, and they were able to get a decision made that was effectively communicated out to not just the people doing work, but an entire nation was watching. And so when we were there, so I'm part of a incident management team that travels around the country going to these type of events, major disasters, and we work in the background. And sometimes that's hard to see the background work. And I know that sometimes even for private industry, you have people who are out front, boots on the ground. You have people who are, standing at the desks making decisions, but there's other people there who are helping to facilitate. And that's kind of what we do on this team, is facilitate. And so I was very happy to be able to go in and make sure that we were able to help bring people together, get the right decision makers at the table, provide them with the information they needed to make effective decisions, and then get those decisions communicated out to everybody, through press conferences, news releases, to boots on the ground people. And we were able to get work happening effectively. And that was, there were a lot of different agencies there, a lot of different people. And that's very difficult to bring all those people together. And I think that was probably one of the more impactful events I've just been involved in, just from a national visibility standpoint. But it's really hard to make sure that we're doing the things that aren't always the flashiest or the fun things or the cool things that you might see on TV. But we're doing solid, hard work and trying to put things together. And we do that, in Frederick, we do that as the team goes around. I've been to wildfires in Montana. My team spent months in Asheville, North Carolina, trying to help organize those efforts. And it's really important that we focus on bringing people together and working together. And I think that's sometimes a hard thing to see in the background, but that's one of the things I feel most proudest about, is that we're able to come into those kind of situations, bring some order, make sure that all the people who are there trying to do good work together to be effective. And so it's not just, a hit or miss, like here one group is doing great work, but that's not serving everyone. We need to make sure that everyone's working on the same page and we're getting everyone taken care of.
Yeah, and you mentioned the higher the profile, the more organizations you get involved, the more those egos get involved, and the more the politics, and I spell that with a TICKS, because most of the ones that write the legislation are the blood-sucking parasites. Look at their bank accounts versus their salaries. That's all I'll say about that for now. But it's hard, and without you doing that, the show doesn't go on and the people don't get served. Wow. No.
Yeah, I mean, we've been to hurricanes in Florida and trying to make sure that all of the different groups that are affected in a specific town or a county are coming to the table together and they're talking. And so it's not just the ego of one town versus the ego, or we see a lot, like a county will want to do things and then the town doesn't want to play along the same way. Or we go to, North Carolina and trying to make sure that there's tons of different relief organizations there and they're all doing parts, but they need to come together. So it's taking care of the whole. And that's difficult sometimes to be able to put that into place. But that's something I feel most proud about, is that it's not the highest visibility, but it's the most effective at serving people.
Yeah. So that really brings me to the question about, the purpose of your organization. How does that coordinate with your individual purpose and the values that you hold most dear for you?
I had no idea throughout most of my career what servant leadership is. But I feel like that's where I've lived most of my career. And that's what we strive for in the fire department. My kids are involved in scouting still. And I just was at a scouting event over the past weekend, and they were talking about the importance of servant leadership. And I think sometimes it gets glossed over a little bit, but really the importance of making sure that we're there for other people and not just for ourselves is huge. And I think that's the biggest purpose I have. And so, as a young firefighter, my biggest goal was making sure I took care of the people that we were serving, going out on calls for. Then I became a leader, and my job now as a leader is not making sure that we're taking care of the people on the calls. It's making sure that the people who are doing that have the support they need. And so, that's it's kind of a whole thing in the fire department. We talk about, like, I am here for we, and we are here for them. And that's that's our mantra all the time. I am here for we are here for them. And the them, and if you're a boots on the ground firefighter riding in the back of the fire truck, them is the people in the house that's on fire. Mm-hmm. As the fire officer riding in front, or in the chief's vehicle coming behind, them are the people who are the firefighters that are going in that house. And that's very important to remember. And it's a huge part of our purpose.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I often hear people say, hey, I'm not going to ask you to do anything I'm not willing to do myself. And I hear that. And while I respect it, it's not necessarily something the leader can say in many cases. To your point with that servant leadership, I heard Dave Ramsey explain it once of, I'm not doing the things that you can and should be doing yourself. I'm doing the things that you can't do that allow you to do the things you can do better and remove the obstacles. And that's, you define that as well as anybody I've ever heard. Thank you for that. So,
go ahead. So just was going to throw out there just an example. So, like, one of the things that we do on this incident management team, like when we go to the major disasters, is we put together an incident action plan. And it's just a written plan that talks about how we're supporting the people who are going to do the work in the field. What do they need for food? How we're getting them food? What do they need for supplies? Where should they be? When should they be there? Who are they working with? What do they need to do while they're there? So that you can hand that to a work supervisor and they know exactly what work they're going to do, who they're doing it with, and how they're being supported. And sometimes that takes a life of its own. And so that plan starts to become its own thing. And we try to constantly remind people that the plan doesn't exist because it's a great plan, or it doesn't exist because we need a plan. The plan exists because there are people doing work, and we have to help them be able to do their work effectively. And that's what the purpose of the plan is. The purpose isn't just to write a plan. It's to make sure the people who are doing work can do it effectively. And that's a really hard point to focus on, but it's a very critical point to focus on.
Yeah, they got to have a place to sleep. They got to have food. They need those things. And without that plan, without the people that provide that stuff, well, they can't do their work. That's huge. To kind of bring this to a close, I'm going to ask, what advice would you give somebody young in their career looking to grow and take on more leadership responsibility? As somebody, what I'm going to say, not necessarily early to mid 20s, but somebody, regardless of their age, earlier in that career, looking to, hey, I feel like I can make a difference for people.
Yeah, I think that the number one thing I will say is read. And that's tough for people these days, tough to find time. But, whether you do it on Kindle, whether you go to the library and do old school, whether you buy a book, even if you do audiobooks, watch a YouTube video, whatever it is, watching and learning from people who are in the leadership field is huge. So come into Dove development, very important. Or like following national known leaders. You have, John Maxwell, Simon Sinek, you have Jocko Willink, Dave Ramsey, all these different people who offer leadership advice and discussion, and they all have a different perspective. And that's the key for us is we don't want to learn just from one person because, I can go to New York City and learn from New York City how they do firefighting, but Frederick County and even Fairfax County is not filled with thousands and thousands of 60-story high-rise buildings. It's not filled with the Bronx. We're different. And so you need to get perspective, but you need to have those multiple different perspectives. And I think for a lot of people, that's probably one of the huge things is really just getting access to leadership lessons and thoughts to help kind of trigger how you feel about it. And where, you can read a book about the Navy SEALs. I'm not a Navy SEAL, never have been, but there's some interesting perspectives they bring to the table. Doesn't always apply, but it helps me shape my thoughts. And then the other thing, and I don't know, I'm not a huge background in private industry, but I know in any government operation, basically, there's always classes that you can take. So like learning Excel intermediate Excel, learning to use OneDrive, learning to use PowerPoint. And I think that if you can take some of those side classes that maybe don't directly look at leadership, but help you build out your skill set. So if you're leading someone and you're trying to get a project done and they're struggling with Excel, maybe you can offer some advice, or maybe you can kind of understand, or maybe you can build something yourself. And so some of those side classes that typically aren't looked at as being a huge issue. I'm not an Excel expert, but I can build a spreadsheet. I can throw together a PowerPoint. I can work on, now I'm trying to learn a little bit more about AI and how that works, which is a whole other ball game. But, having some of those basic knowledge things so you're able to do stuff for yourself and be able to make things happen is huge.
Yeah, the biggest point I heard you say was the read, chase the resources, and so on. And I think about how many times I run into people and they say, well, I really don't like to read.
Yep.
I don't either, but I don't like to fail. And I do want to make sure I'm making a difference in the people that are counting on me, right? So sometimes it means doing crap we don't want to do to get the result we want to get, right? And I think about
I switched over to podcasts and I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I have a work truck. I'm always driving between meetings. I'm going down the road, back and forth, doing whatever. And when I get in the truck, podcasts go on. I used to listen to music, but I think it's, I don't have time to read. I want to read, but I don't have much time. And so I just listen to podcasts as much as possible.
Yep. Yeah. And whatever those resources are, it's how do we, and we've got so much. I mean, you mentioned podcasts, and most of them are free, and Audible's been life-changing for me. I remember for years having a stupid little 2 AA battery cassette player that I kept in the door of my vehicle because my CD player was broken and I couldn't afford to fix it or replace it. And that's what I did, was I was replacing AA batteries and listening to that stupid thing with the window down held up to my ear. But it's what I had access to, and it was a book on tape at the time. Now I can do 3 times speed and all this different nonsense, but hey, figure it out, right?
I still have a commuter vehicle that I kept for quite a long time, commuting back and forth to the up 66 to Fairfax. I still have it. There is a cassette player in the vehicle that recently stopped working. I was like, man, it's like the kids always freak out. They're like, what in the world are you doing, Dad? And it's like, it's what we grew up on, right?
Yeah, deal with it. You'll up one day, you'll read about, Google it. That's fantastic. Oh, Ben, this has been a blast. Thank you for doing this. As importantly, thank you for being willing to be part of the event in June. And gosh, really appreciate the friendship and everything we get to do together. I'm going to bring this to a close. Hang with me as I finish it up. So for those of you listening to the Leading at the Next Level podcast, we'll pick up soon with some different content. If you'd like to go deeper into anything that Ben and I've shared, or you just need continuing education credits for a professional credential, Dove Development Consulting is approved recertification providers with the Human Resource Certification Institute and the Society for Human Resource Management. So our Leading at the Next Level program now has over 150 individual lessons, all approved for credit through both entities. And what I'll offer you is, if you reach out to us at admin@dove-development.net, we'll give you a 45-day all-access trial to that complete program, including the live sessions that we do twice a month with Q&A that we never record. We do that for the folks that can show up, let you kick the tires, get the professional development credits, and so on and so forth at no cost. Love to be able to serve you. Now, with that said, we look forward to seeing you soon. Ben, thanks again for being with us, and I'm going to call it done.